This is the Last Minute Blues Podcast with Donny Fandango, Jeff Burton, Alex Ferrario, and former Blues defenseman Jamie Rivers.
It is the Last Minute Blues Podcast. Donny Fandango joined in studio by Alex Ferrario from 101 ESPN and our dude Jeremy Rutherford from The Athletic. Gentlemen, I don't mean to disappoint you. I had sent you text messages this morning saying that I was pissed off and that I was going to start with a bit of a rage during the podcast. And I'm going to tell you what it is, but there is no rage other than the rage that I am an egomaniac douchebag.
Okay, well, JR, this means we leave the podcast.
First of all, boo on the no rage.
I might rage on myself. So in our lobby, all right, there is a flat screen television, and it shows all kinds of different station-related content. All right. And one of the things, like a month or so ago, the sales team had us all go into the video room and record these little sort of testimonials so that they can use to shop out to clients and things like that. All right. So over the course of the last, week or so, I have seen the scroll of jocks out in the studio. Or out in the lobby. I've seen you. I've seen BK. I've seen, literally everybody except myself.
He's waited out there for a half hour.
That's why I saw you standing by the TV in the lobby
Donny,
for an hour.
In the lobby?
Donny, what are you doing?
I'm watching them show people that we work with. God bless them. Wonderful people. But I have more followers than they do. And so I'm thinking to myself, why are they not showing me? And so I come in this morning and I go to Jody, who's our absolutely amazing receptionist. I love her. She is so sweet. And I said, hey, Jody, have you seen me up on that screen by any chance? And she goes, honestly, Donny, I have not. And I said,
and she's watching all day.
She's like, I have to stare at this crap all day long.
And I can legitimately feel like my body heat, just like I'm just getting hot. And so I go sit down at my desk, and I'm stewing about what I'm going to say. Jody knocks on my office door. Hey, Donny, you are in there. I just haven't seen you yet. Okay, so if we could rewind here for just a second. Total overreaction on my part. And then on top of it, an ego-driven moment on top of it all. And I just feel like an idiot.
So, that said, but I've walked past there 4 million times and I've never seen you. Are we just all missing you?
I think Jody just said that just so she's like, oh man, Donny just went into his office very angry. Very angry. Is that why when I walked by, though, Jody was like, just so you know, Donny told me to take your, quote, ugly mug off of this TV.
Yeah, and I didn't even use the words ugly mug either.
That's Jody being a sweetheart.
Right. So it's just one of those things, man. I understand that in this building that we have a lot of talent and a lot of great folks, but sometimes you just want to goddamn be acknowledged for being goddamn semi good at what you do.
If I was Jody, the next time he walks in the lobby, it just played. They just played it.
Well, and the worst part is when she came back to talk to me, she realized that I was not happy about the situation, and she was so very gentle. So very just boy, if I would have known maybe when you asked me the first time, I would have said, oh yeah, I saw it. Yeah, you look great.
Meanwhile, the next barbecue Jody is at, how's that Donny Fandango, in person? Well, let me tell you.
So Jody went back to her office after she told Donny that the video is up there, and she sent a mass email out. Somebody get this video up on this TV right now.
No. But man, but that's all right. I feel like I'm there's not very much middle room when it comes to Donny Fandango. You're either in or you're out.
You know what you get, and that is honestly what I love about you.
It's fantastic. So, had an overreaction this morning, but also ate a delicious sausage muffin with egg. And so, man, I kind of feel like I found my center again.
Had some Fruity Pebbles.
Oh, that's a great call.
Yeah, I'm still a 5-year-old at heart.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But you know me, I can pack on the Fruity Pebbles.
You wake up, you got out of the playpen.
Yeah, I did. rolled off of my mattress that was on the floor. Took my onesie off, changed my diaper, and had some Fruity Pebbles.
Okay, so let me ask, though, are these legit Fruity Pebbles, or is this a generic version of the Fruity Pebbles?
They're legit. They sell them at Aldi's. Shout out to Aldi's because you get it cheaper at Aldi's. Buy them at Aldi's all the time. Buy it for my 3-year-old because she likes it, but I eat it more than she does.
Man, with the Aldi like literally next door, and I don't take advantage of that. I should take advantage of that.
You got to go on Wednesdays when they restock. They get the truck in on Wednesdays. Aldi's is fresh.
Why did you tell everybody that? You should have told me that off the microphone.
Except in High Ridge or off of Gravois Bluffs. They do not deliver on Wednesdays. Crap.
Gentlemen, look at this. All hockey notes.
Wow. My gosh.
All right here. All hockey notes.
That one says Alex is a jerk.
No, it absolutely does not. We'll wait, though, towards the end of the podcast to figure that one out. But very, big day yesterday in Blues history. Drew Bannister named, I believe, the 27th head coach in Blues history. And I started to think about this the completely incorrect way yesterday. But I read JR's article about Drew Bannister.
Whoa.
Oh, and it turned me
around.
around. I don't know why, guys, and I'll just be very honest. The Bannister thing was not sexy to me in any way, shape, or form, and I think that's really probably the base of any issue that I had with it. Because when you go back and you look at the numbers and you look at the record, there's no reason that the guy shouldn't get a chance to have this be his team going forward.
Yeah, I don't think there was ever going to be anything sexy about it, and that's no disrespect to Drew Bannister, who's worked his entire last 12 years to get to this point, and he finally gets that shot, and he does pretty well with it, and now all of a sudden, he gets the job, and he's excited about the future, and then all the Blues fans are just like, snooze. Yeah, like, oh. So I just think, and I tweeted this yesterday, that I think it's a situation we all have to understand that the Blues are in this retool that we've been talking about, right? And they weren't in the market for a Stanley Cup contending coach. And so if you look at the list of people that's going to put in there that Doug Armstrong would be looking at, it's either retreads who are looking to get their feet back on the ground, or it's an up-and-coming coach. And I think a lot of Blues fans were saying, don't go the retread route. Like, we don't want to see another Gerard Gallant, these guys.
Don't do Travis Green that was just hired by Ottawa.
Let's not do that. So if you're going to grab a guy who, quote-unquote, up-and-coming or an inexperienced guy, why not go with a guy who's been here and knows these players and Doug Armstrong has a working relationship with?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it wasn't enthusiastic. Like, yeah, they got Drew Bannister, but I wasn't bummed out that they got Drew Bannister. Yeah. I thought it was the right decision. I just was hoping that there was a step forward. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that is, like, you looked at the Jim Montgomerys, you looked at the David Carls, and you felt like, okay, this might be the permanent fixture for this core group of Blues players. It's going to have the current guys, it's going to have the younger guys. That's the step. I was very happy that they didn't go the route of the Travis Greens or the Guy Bouchers, the one that you, Pierre LeBrun, had brought up to you. Any of these assistant coaches in the NHL, or even the Todd McClellans. I know there were some that were on board with Todd McClellan. I was happy they didn't do that, because that to me was signifying, yeah, we're still far off. I think with Drew Bannister, to me, it signifies like we're not competing for anything next year. But Doug has done a great job of keeping fans in the loop of like, look, we know where we're at. This is kind of year one or year two of this retool that we're talking about. And frankly, for Drew Bannister, it was the right decision, because if you're trying to take steps forward, if you're trying to grow these younger guys that are going to be stepping in on top of getting the best out of their top players now, that's the guy that just showcased it for you. My only concern with the Drew Bannister front, and I said this yesterday on the air, was that it did feel a lot like a lot of the same stuff from when Craig Berube was fired to Drew Bannister taking over. And I understand that you can't change schematically in the middle of the season. Like, that is not an easy thing to do for any coach. But, I mean, I talked with Bannister back when he was in the AHL, and maybe things change now that he's got a full offseason, but he even told me, like, yeah, I coach very similar to how Craig Berube coaches, and we didn't see any change in the players. We saw a shift in the power play. We saw a shift in certain guys, but the 5-on-5 numbers were eerily similar. Now you have a full offseason to work with an entire roster to put your game plan into place, and you might have a different looking roster. And to me, if that's the way, if that's how you're going to approach this season, then it's best to go with somebody who a lot of those players already know.
All right. So then, follow-up question here, guys. Do you think that there will be a change in any of the assistant coaches, or will the staff remain the same? I would have to think that Steve Ott would be a guy that I would think that he would still be here. Obviously, I think Doug Armstrong likes him a lot if he's going to put him, on Team Canada and things like that as an assistant. So how do you guys think that the rest of the coaching staff filters out?
Well, according to Doug Armstrong yesterday, he said that he expects everybody to be back. They're all under contract, so you're looking at Steve Ott, Mike Weber, David Alexander, the goaltending coach, and then also Michael Babcock, who's a skills coach. According to Doug yesterday, he says they're all going to be back. Now, I half expected that, especially if Bannister was going to be back, because I think if we were going to hear about dismissals, we would have heard about it at the end of the season. Okay. And then certainly yesterday when they named, Drew's going to be the head coach, they would have said something in terms of letting go the assistants, but they're going to keep him. And in part, I thought Drew had something really nice to say, Alex. He said that, hey, these guys had my back when I came in and took over as the interim coach. I want to have their back. So he expressed to Doug Armstrong that he was ecstatic to keep them, and that was part of Doug's thinking in keeping the staff together.
I really like that.
Yeah.
I mean, for what it's worth as a fan, I really enjoy hearing that a lot. I mean, and that makes me kind of like their little grouping even that much more. You know what I mean? I mean, that might be hokey or whatever, but I think that there's something to that, man.
Well, because that's rare. I mean, typically when a coach comes in, they want to put their whole staff into place. And you got to think like Drew Bannister, who's coached at juniors, who's coached in the American Hockey League. Like, he's coached with a lot of different guys. He's got relationships, and he said, no, these are the guys I want to work with. And frankly, I think Blues fans should be excited about that because, I mean, the improvements that you saw in certain areas, face-off-wise, that's Steve Ott's area of expertise. Defensively, to where I felt like they were much better than what they were the year prior, that's those two guys' area of expertise that they're working with, and now you just got to figure out the other areas that they need to tighten up with.
Well, and this goes to something that we have been talking about, pardon me, since Craig Berube was let go earlier in the season, and that is we wanted to see how much was on the players, and really, it's up to the players to make this thing go. I mean, I think that they are as equipped as they can be as far as coaching and all of that stuff goes. It's 100% on these dudes to make this thing friggin' work.
I think it is, and it should be, right?
Absolutely.
And the one thing that kind of piggybacking off what we were just talking about, Drew coming back and the staff coming back, is there's some stability. Now, Blues fans might look at it and say, well, we don't think, some of the Blues fans think that this isn't the staff that should be running the team, but there's stability here. This is a situation where you need continuity because there's so much changing around the team, and so you need familiar faces. You need, kind of what Drew brought last year at the end of the season when they went 30-19-5. And the other thing, and I touched on this with Drew yesterday in the conference call, is the fact that these players know that he's the head coach now. And I think that's important because, all of us, if you got a temporary boss or you got somebody who kind of just shifting into your department and he might be your boss or she might be your boss for a little bit, you just don't know. Do you invest in that time, what it takes to develop that good relationship when this person might be gone in a couple months? I think it's human nature sometimes not to, and Drew acknowledged that yesterday. So now, 2-year deal, guess what, players? He's your boss.
He's your guy.
And you better listen to this guy. And then Drew made the point. He said, I want to take the time to make the phone calls, even go meet these guys in person in the offseason and develop those relationships further. And his point, which is understandable, is when times get tough, or I need to healthy scratch a guy, or I need to tell him what he's doing wrong, you can have those conversations easier when you've developed that and you know each other on a common
That's
level.
The part that I find really intriguing now that the interim tag is taken off, because it felt like last year we were all talking about the accountability factor and how Bannister's not afraid to scratch guys. Bannister also had nothing to lose in that half season. I mean, you were an interim. You didn't know if you had the job. I mean, Doug made it pretty clear, like, he didn't have the job when he started, and then it was as he continued to show success. Do you have that same ability to look at a guy and say, like, you're playing like crap and we're going to sit you? Because that's what I think made Bannister so successful this season, was the accountability factor. But it's different when you got a 2-year contract and you're around and you're building the relationships with these players, compared to when you're here for 6 months and you're a contract guy and you don't know if you're going to be here. So you can coach a little bit more hard ass rather than what you would with a contract, is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely so. So, guys, how do you judge how Bannister did with some of those guys that he had previous relationships for? And you know what I'm getting at here, especially Jordan Cairo. Like, I don't even know that. I'm trying not even to be coy about that.
Don't beat around the bush.
But we saw Matthew Kessel come in and make an impact. And I believe that probably, maybe at least some of that has to do with Bannister knowing him, Kessel feeling comfortable, the whole sort of situation. So how do you kind of feel like he did with those guys, and especially Jordan Kyrou?
Yeah. I personally, like, on the Kyrou front, you can't deny you saw progress with him once Bannister took over, especially the amount of goals and points that he put up. He was a point-per-game player when Bannister took over, and he had the 30 goals, and defensively he was still good. I still don't think you saw that next step from Jordan Kyrou, because on top of the offensive success you saw, and defensively he was good, you still saw those lapses. Now, at some point, us as fans, we have to look at it and say, this just might be Kyrou. Like, we might be hoping for more. This just might be who Jordan Kyrou was, and that's the point where you're going to find out within the next couple of years with Drew Bannister. But Kyrou became the goal scorer that everybody was saying he wasn't under Craig Berube. He became that goal scorer and wasn't a defensive liability in that stretch. The one that I'm a little concerned, I guess concerned is too harsh of a word. The one I'm interested in is Pavel Buchnevich. Because you saw Buch did not get back to his same self by the end of that season. He was even upset with himself at the end of the exit interviews that he did. He played a lot of center down the stretch, so you wonder if that's going to be his role now that Drew Bannister is here. You didn't see the goal scoring with him. Now, he could have just been dinged up from an injury that was earlier in the season, but that's the one I think I'm most intrigued by is if Bannister's the coach, does Buchnevich mesh into that 2-year time frame with the Blues because he's a pending UFA after next season?
Yeah, I'll just touch on Kyrou. A couple things. One is, I thought it was enlightening what Drew Bannister said, I think it was a couple weeks ago, when he talked about, is it the end of the season interview? He's just asked a simple, basic question, hey, how do you think that Kyrou did? And he says, listen, I've had a lot of man-to-man talks with Jordan Kyrou, and not just about hockey, but just, getting to know him and things like that. So I think that if he continues to nurture that relationship and develop that, then you get to a place with Jordan Kyrou where you can be critical, he takes it well, so on and so forth. But I think big picture, I always tell this, to my kids, my family, when we're talking, hey, let's take a step back for 1 second and look at the big picture here. And the big picture is, it doesn't matter who the coach is, Jordan Kyrou is never going to get to the level that he can get to and has the talent to get to unless he takes it upon himself. So
it's true, man.
It could be a Drew Bannister relationship. It could have been a Craig Berube relationship. It could have been a Montgomery relationship if he came here, whatever. But until Jordan Kyrou, understands that, hey, last year was maybe a step up defensively, but overall, consistently, things like that, I need to do X, Y, Z, and I'm going to do that this year, and I'm going to do it from day one, and I'm going to move forward. Hey, Drew, you're there. You're going to help me. Cool, let's go. I think that's what it has to come down to. But just real quick, Alex brings up a good point, and I figured that we would get into this a little bit, is what does the Drew Bannister hiring, and maybe you have this on that long list.
That's a pretty long list.
Let's see.
Yeah. What does the hiring of Drew Bannister mean in terms of the big picture? If this is full steam ahead, let's compete next year, let's get third in the division or the wild card, or let's continue the retool and not really worry what happens with the record. I think, again, go back to the big picture, kids.
Man, I feel like I'm talking to my dad right now.
Yeah. I think it's a situation where they're going to move ahead, right? Nobody's purposely saying, hey, who cares if we finish second wild card or eighth in the division or league rather. I think it's a situation where Drew's the coach and he was the logical choice, as we just talked about. So decisions are going to have to be made, but I don't think it changes what they're trying to do. They're still trying to put a good team on the ice. They're still bringing young guys in. And the reason I bring this up now is because you just touched on Buchnevich. Yeah. So let's talk about this for a second. With Pavel Buchnevich, he's going to look at the situation and say, okay, he's going to be the coach for a couple years. Okay, they're in this state right now, retool. What do I want to do? Do I want to be part of this, or do I want to try to go somewhere else? And then the negotiations will go from there. I don't think Doug Armstrong, when he decided that Drew Bannister is going to be the coach for the next 2 years, said to himself, okay, well, now we're not going to try to sign Pavel Buchnevich. I think that they're still going to try to do that, as he's said multiple times. I don't think he's going to go back on that. And I think Doug had a pretty good idea all along that Drew Bannister was going to be the coach. So I don't think it changes any of the direction of the thing. I just think that they realize where they're at right now. They got the coach that fit whatever they're doing right now, and then now they make these key decisions moving forward to continue to build this thing, not necessarily to be that playoff team next year, but just wherever it can take them.
I think you saw the development of Bolduc. To Donnie's original point, Bolduc and Kessel, you saw how those guys shined under Bannister in what the 50-plus games that he coached. I also feel like that hiring, you mentioned stability in our open, I also feel like this hiring was cognizant also with Jimmy Snuggerud coming in at the end of the season, with Dvorsky potentially pushing for this roster. Like, you've got a lot of these younger guys that you want to have stability. You want them to have the same face. You don't want them to have somebody coming in that's here now, but then he doesn't work out in a year, and then you've got a new coach that comes in. Sure. Kind of like, and we talked about Davis Payne yesterday on the air. I don't think this is the same situation as Davis Payne, but it's the first thing that came up. What you don't want to happen is you have a Davis Payne for 1.5 years, and then you get rid of him while Snuggerud and Dvorsky are trying to develop on top of Bolduc and Kessel and Neighbors and all of these guys, and then you go out and get another head coach. I think the hope is you can do what Tampa did with John Cooper, to where it was, hey, we got all of these younger dudes, let's grow with Drew Bannister. That comes down to Bannister getting the most out of those guys, but I think it also comes out to how do these guys develop under this head coach.
All right, my question here, guys, and this might be a dumb question. I love Booch. I mean, he's one of my guys. He's one of my favorite guys. But guys, I'm just struggling with why it makes sense in this stage of what they're going through for them to sign him to an extension. It just seems with his age, with the money in which that he's probably going to get, it just feels like square peg round hole kind of thing. Am I way off base there?
No, I don't think you are. And I got to bring this up. I told Alex this a few weeks ago is, after the trade deadline, Pavel Buchnevich is still here, and Doug Armstrong talked about re-signing him, Donnie. And I went up to Pavel in the locker room, and I said, okay, now that you're here and people are talking about potentially re-signing you, is that something you'd be interested in? And he looked at me and he said, I heard on podcast you guys tried to trade me, and now you want to re-sign me. And I said,
Pavel Buchnevich, big fan of the Last Minute Blues podcast.
Booch, I love you, buddy.
Yeah.
But I
stop trying to trade him, Donnie.
But I still don't. But for real, make it make sense in the grand scheme of what the team is trying to do going forward.
Yeah, so I'm going to try to keep out of my mind that he's listening right now.
Probably is. It's fine.
But I think it's
Booch.
a situation where it doesn't make sense. First of all, as you said, great player, great teammate, like a great teammate. You talk to any player on that team and they'll tell you great things. And I did a story on him earlier in the season and just glowing stuff. So I think he's great for the organization. I think he's great for the team. I think he's great for the locker room. But if you're him and you're going on 30 years old when your contract starts, I always say this, who in their right mind would take a 4 or 5 year deal? Then you're putting yourself in a situation where you're 35 years old and you're looking for a new contract. And yeah, the salary cap will be up by then, but you're also 35 years old. Right. And are you going to start playing 1 year deals? That's what teams are comfortable giving you after that. So if you're Pavel Buchnevich or anybody 30 years old, take that 8 times 8. And I wouldn't begrudge anybody for doing that. But I think that the Blues are in a position where, other than like a Braden Shen, I don't really see Doug Armstrong doing that with the forwards like he did with Braden. Mm-hmm. And I know some people are concerned about that contract. Like he didn't do it with Backus. He hasn't done it with anybody else. So that's my concern. Would he be great to put along a Snuggerud and Dvorsky and those guys, Kyrou, Thomas, for the next few years? He would. But I think if the possibility is there to trade him at the deadline, and he doesn't want to take a deal that's 4 to 5 years for $8 million, what have you, and he wants that 8-year max, I think it's going to present the Blues with a pretty, difficult decision to make. And I think Doug, as he's shown in the past, has erred on the side of not giving out those contracts.
Well, and I just personally feel, this is just me, if you don't have a contract extension by the start of the season, I don't know if it's going to get done. How often have we seen a UFA go into his walk-off season and an extension?
Perron, O'Reilly.
And an extension that large. Right. Like, those guys weren't getting that big of a contract. It's not often you see Doug hand out those big contracts, so it feels like if you don't get it done going into this season, that my gut would be like, I don't know if Booch is going to be a part of this. And if you're a retooling team, like, set aside the rebuild, because I know there's a lot of fans listening that probably are screaming at the radio or their phone like, this is a rebuild. Whether it is or if it isn't, if you're trying to develop into a winner, you have to have winning players. Like, that's the most important thing. And I think you have, not that I think, you have the Shens, the Parekos, the Benningtons, the Nicolettis. You have guys that have won before. But you also need guys that can take your game to the next level. And that's where I think Pavel Buchnevich is. And I know this is a different circumstance here, but when they gave Alexander Steen that contract extension, he was, 32 years old?
Yeah.
Because it was a 4-year deal, 4 or 5 year deal.
It was 5.
But it was... I looked at this last night. It was a 7.8% salary cap hit to the Blues roster at the time. For reference, Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou are 9.7% towards the salary cap. Now, the cap going up, what I'm trying to say is I think the Alexander Steen contract extension might be a little bit like what they do with Pavel Buchnevich, where the back years might not look great, but how does he play as one of those players on a role team on the back end?
Yeah.
So, like, when the Blues are ready to compete, let's say he does get a 8-year contract extension. Can he be the same type of role player for $8 million that Alexander Steen was for, what was that, $5.8 million?
Right in that neighborhood.
And I think the cap, because of the cap rising and what it was when Steen got it, I think you're talking about very similar situations in who those players were. The question is, will Doug give him 8 years? Because I don't know if Doug would give him 8 years. It's not very often that a 30-year-old gets a contract that takes him to 38 with the St. Louis Blues. Typically, it's around 36.
Well, and if Doug's given 8 years, he probably wants a lesser AAV, and I don't know that Pav would do that when he can get it elsewhere.
Or you get more AAV and you get less years, which I think that is more ideal for the Blues.
A player that I like just immensely, but over the course of the season, I would not say that this was his best season wearing the note. And it is concerning going forward. Braden Shin as a second liner. That is not ideal.
I feel like I'm on an island here, and you guys could tell me if I am. I just felt like that was a one-off for Braden Shin. I felt like this past season, for how bad it was, I feel like that was a lot of, you're a first-time captain on top of your team stinking, the Stanley Cup champion coach being fired, an interim coming in, and your team being a 500 team all season long. That is a lot for a captain to take on. Yep. I felt an awful lot like what Braden Shin went through in the first half of the season was figuring out how to be captain. And then the second half, we know how Braden Shin plays. Part of me wondered if Braden Shin was just dinged up. Mm-hmm. I put the same I did with Colton Parayko 2 years ago, the same I did with Jordan Bennington last year. I set that aside and I say, boy, I don't think that's going to last. I think Braden Shen's more like what he was 2 years ago. I don't think he's a 30-goal scorer. I would say he's probably consistently like a 25-goal scorer, but I don't think he's just all of a sudden become a third-line player at 31 years old.
Yeah, I fall somewhere in between you guys. I think it was a tough year for him, but I do give him a little bit of grace because of what Alex said, because of the captaincy. And, difficult year, you have the coach fired, and you're trying to keep guys together with the interim coach. But I also think, with that said, that we saw a drop-off. And can he bounce back and score a consistent season worth of 25 goals? Like this year, he scored, 2021?
Yeah.
But he had 7 of them in the last, 3 weeks of the season.
Yeah.
So there were lulls where he went 17 games, 18 games twice. So those were 2 droughts, 17 and 18 and 16 and 18, where he didn't score a goal. And that can't happen if you're a top 6 player playing, 18 minutes a night. Yeah. But so with Braden, I think he can be in your top 6. I just think he needs to play the wing. And that's why I think the Blues are going to have to figure out the second-line center situation, whether it be in free agency or Dvorsky just comes in
be Dvorsky.
and surprises. Yeah. 18, 19 years old, come in and play second-line center in the NHL. Tough. We'll see what happens. He is AHL eligible, so they can play him and then send him down to the AHL and bring him back up. So we'll see what happens with that, but I fall somewhere in between. Disappointing season, I think, for Braden Shen, even though he got to 20 goals. But I it's not that he can't ever play the center again. For sure he can, and he'd be a heck of a third-line center. But I think if he's in your top 6, he's got to play majority wing.
Yeah. One of the players that everybody has been talking about this particular playoff run, as well as the last couple of months of the season, the name Wyatt Johnson in Dallas is everywhere. I mean, this kid.
That's who I think Dalibor Dvorsky is.
Okay, so see, that's what my question.
Maybe better.
Clip that.
Yeah.
So
God, that's going to bite me, isn't it? Just like Hall & Oates. Damn it! Why do you do this, Ferrario?
But what... When you see a guy like Wyatt Johnson do what he has done, does that make you a little more inclined to think, hey, maybe Dvorsky can fit into this team. And I know they're not the same players. Damn it. That's not what I mean. Well, but just as far as like somebody that has, it just seems like he might be a guy that could push.
Let me back up my Wyatt Johnston comp before people start just destroying me. The reason that I've put those two players together is because Johnston played 1 year in junior hockey. And that 1 year in junior hockey, he was a 110-point player. And as you put in your great article that Donny didn't read, JR,
read it.
Dalibor Dvorsky didn't play all of his junior season. And if he plays all of his junior season, you're probably talking about 115 points, right on pace where Wyatt Johnston was. Johnston came to the NHL that first year and was like a third-line player for them. But the reason that he had success that third year was because there were so many veteran players that were able to kind of push him down and he didn't have to try as hard. Now, the Blues are in a different situation there. They don't have the Pavelskis and the Sagans and the Bens and the Hintzes, but to your point, they do have a Braden Shen that can play wing, a Brandon Saad that can play wing. If Buchnevich and Thomas and Kyrou are here, if Jake Neighbors is here, Dvorsky's not a top six player. He would be on your third line, and your third line could look something like a Brandon Saad or a Braden Shen, or if Kevin Hayes is still here, or even an Alexei Toropchenko. And I feel like Wyatt Johnston continued to progress with his skill was because he was never relied on to be the guy. I think fans might look at Dvorsky and say, oh, well, he's going to be a 50-goal scorer this first season because he's a top 10 pick. No, I think like you could get 15 goals out of him, but you see progress from 1 year to the next year. I mean, look at what Bolduc did in the last 20 games of the season, more comfortable. Now you add in the top 10 pick talent level, which, by the way, people have already said, like, with that draft, which I know was just last year, but they're saying Dvorsky, just from what they've seen in 1 year, could be like a top 5 pick. So I know Wyatt Johnston's a tough thing to do right now because he's doing this, but I look at when you go 1 year in juniors and then you're 19 years old playing in the NHL, if you're a third-line player and you're surrounded by veterans and you're not relied on to be the guy like Columbus, like Anaheim, like Arizona have all done, I do think Dvorsky could have somewhat success like that Johnston did in his first season.
All right, so here's the question right here. So I came up with this last night. And I want to read it exactly how I wrote it. Alex, please tell us your tinfoil hat conspiracy theory about this year's draft lottery. I'm sensing you believe something is sus. And that's a word my kids use, sus.
I'm hip to it.
Every year. Alex?
Oh, yeah, I'm the conspiracy theorist that nobody else believes with the draft.
No, I'm not saying you're the only one, but I'm just saying that you are very passionate about your belief that something is off with the way that this works.
Donnie, somebody wrote something on the internet the other day, and it said sus underneath it, and I called, hey, Georgia, get down here. My daughter came there. I go, hey, somebody wrote, what's that mean, sus? Oh, my God, Dad.
Do you have her look at your article and be like, how can I incorporate young slang into this?
What was it? Jordan Kyrou 2 years ago, he's talking about playing video games with Robert Thomas, and he said that...
Oh, yeah, because didn't he...
What's the word?
Co-op?
Like noob or...
Oh, noob.
Noob.
Yeah,
noob. See, that's how bad I am.
Didn't Tom Timmerman say something to him about like, oh, were you doing that with... Were you cotting it up with Robert Thomas after a game or something? It was so uncomfortable. But, Poor Tom T didn't understand the gaming world.
Yeah, Jordan Kyrou in the interview said that he called Robert Thomas a noob. Yeah, I had to go Google that. Too.
I know what a noob is, man. I'm not that young. All right, tinfoil theory.
Okay.
This might surprise people. I had none with last night. Last night was such a boring draft. I would have bet a lot of money that the team formerly known as Arizona was going to win that lottery. Mm-hmm. That was my conspiracy. Or Chicago. Those are my two conspiracy. San Jose one makes sense because they were ass, and if you're going to find a conspiracy theory with it, which I would love to do, San Jose deserves that first overall pick. Chicago just got it. Columbus has had plenty of opportunities, and they've never gotten better. Any of these other teams around you, like San Jose was good for a long time, and then you were awful. So kind of deserved that first pick. But my tinfoil with it all was Utah was going to come away with the number 1 overall pick and say, hey, how did this happen, ladies and gentlemen? A new team got a first overall pick.
Whoa. Wow. I do forget that, though. I mean, San Jose was so good for so long.
It was like 15 years that they were in the playoffs every year fighting for a Stanley Cup or at least a Western Conference championship. Those are the teams that I feel like deserve the first overall picks. Now, I mean, you really leaned into being a bad team this year if you're Mike Greer. Like, you leaned into it this year, but I'm glad that it wasn't a team like Columbus or Calgary or Montreal moving up, because we don't need that anymore.
Yeah, I know it's not ideal that the Blues, I think, got the 16th pick or the 15th pick, whatever it is. But you know what, guys? Like, I feel as though that the Blues drafting has led you to believe that they're going to find somebody good at 16.
Yeah, definitely a possibility. But the one thing that, I think some fans have a hard time with this plan on, and I think for the most part people are understanding what Doug Armstrong's doing, but some people have a hard time with, is you're going to finish in that muddy middle, whatever you want to call it, every time.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to compete. And
even Pronman said that today, where it's like, this is a tough spot to be in if you're a retooling team.
Yeah, you're going to finish in that range. And so they get the 16th pick, and you see it yesterday. The Blues could have, by the way, they had a 0.5% chance to jump up to 6.
I was holding out hope, Donnie. I turned it on, and then I turned it off right away.
Yeah. And so get this, you guys get a kick. So the Athletic does a mock draft. So once the order is set in stone, 1 through 16.
I saw that.
Okay, listen. I love hockey. I love covering hockey. I love learning about players in Europe who are coming over to play the NHL.
JR. You don't know the prospects?
I love all that stuff. But when the Athletic sends you a message that says, we're going to do a mock draft and you need to pick a player who you've never heard of, have never seen play, and can't pronounce his name, you should have seen the slacks going back and forth between me and Pronman last night as I was getting ready to be my pick. Okay, Corey, who would be a good pick here? Well, I think that...
I don't know, JR. That's a little sus that you didn't know what to go after there.
Yeah, what about Nygaard? Oh, yeah, Nygaard would be great. Be great.
Thanks, Corey. Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about him?
So please, as much info as you can give me.
I think one year I did that mock draft, and I picked somebody for the Blues at whatever, 23, and I sent it to the drafting director, whoever it was at the time, and said, here's who I got for you. And like, oh, great, thanks.
This guy's not
keep
going
this in mind.
So here, you want another tinfoil? You want a bigger tinfoil?
Oh, of course.
I don't think the Blues are picking 16th overall in this draft.
You think they're trading up, or you think that they're
trading up? Wild speculation by me. I'm going to put that out on the upfront. But I look at this draft, 1 through 4 is not trading out of that position. I don't think Montreal is selecting 5th overall if they could get an NHL player. I don't think Utah is selecting 6th overall. Ottawa selecting 7th overall. New Jersey selecting 10th overall. I don't see those teams keeping their picks where they're at. I mean, this draft is not as great as last year's was, and the teams that I just listed off, Montreal, Utah, Ottawa, even a little bit of Seattle, Calgary, New Jersey, Buffalo, those teams are needing to compete.
Yeah.
So if the Blues are in a retool and they don't know if they're waiting for some of these players and they want a player that might be going up a little bit higher, i.e. a left-handed defenseman that's 6'7" that plays in Russia. Love you, Silyayev. Respect. I know. You should have asked me for the mock draft.
I should have tried to trade up yesterday.
You should have traded
Where
up,
were you
man.
yesterday?
You should call me, man.
Drafting consultant.
I don't think they're selecting 16th overall.
You heard it here.
So
God, I've had a lot of them today, haven't I?
Well, you are throwing them out
fire.
left and right. All right, so real quick here before
it's
we
not fire until it happens.
Then it's just one of those.
a slow a sizzle.
It's one of those defective fireworks you buy on the 4th of July that blow up at you.
Boys, where's Craig Berube going?
Toronto.
JR?
Well,
I tell you what, I wouldn't rule that out. I've already gotten calls from the Toronto writers saying, okay, what's the story on Berube?
Yeah.
New Jersey's been trying to get him, and it still hasn't happened. So, that tells me New Jersey. The team that I think makes the most sense, and Donnie, you're not going to like this, Winnipeg.
Oh, dude, don't do that.
That's the team that makes he's got everything in place.
Oh, but he does.
Because if Berube goes to Toronto, you don't have goaltending and you don't have defense. You got 4 awesome forwards, but you don't have any of those other things. If you go to Winnipeg, you got it all. You got your defense is set, your goaltending is locked in, although he's not good in the playoffs, and your core is in place for your forward group. You make a couple of tweaks here and there, maybe tighten up that defense. You get a backup goaltender that can relieve Connor Hellebuck for half the season. That's Craig Berube's specialty right there.
Yeah, and also, so there is a great setup in Winnipeg, and I know they've had some attendance questions, stuff like that, but that part aside, their ownership's in place, their management is in place. You look at the Toronto situation, and even if they bring in a coach now, which we haven't heard anything with Keefe yet, right?
No.
So if it were to happen and Berube got that job or wanted that job, Brendan Shanahan, everybody talks about, Kyle Dubas is gone now. When's going to be the end of the Shanahan plan? I mean, they're going to make some changes this offseason for sure, and I'm assuming that Brendan Shanahan is going to be back beyond this season. But if it lasts another year or two, now all of a sudden different people are in there making the decisions, and it's not the people who hired Craig Berube.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Also, the other thing that I think of with Craig Berube, and this doesn't, this is just kind of, me talking, but he's such a great face for a hardworking town.
Yeah.
And you talk about Philadelphia, you talk about St. Louis. I mean, blue collar, and Toronto. There's hardworking people there, but it's so corporate, right? And it's the corporate people in the seats and so on and so forth. So I think he still could succeed there, but gosh, Winnipeg, talking about a blue collar.
I mean, that's about as blue collar as you can ask for.
Dudes, I'm sorry to tell you that you're wrong. I'm telling you. I know it's going to happen. Nope. Tortorella's going to step down. I've said this before. Tortorella is going to take a advisory role with the Flyers, and Berube's going to be the head coach there. And that is an absolutely perfect freaking marriage. You have got a team that's still growing. You've got a great coach. He's going to go back home. He's going to make a bejesus ton of money because they're going to pay him real well. I think that it's Philadelphia, man. And the best part about it for Coach that I love is that he's got some really good opportunities to choose. And even Philadelphia, as a team that probably overplayed themselves in their expectations last year, they got that friggin' Russian magician that's going to come over at some point or the other. Dudes, I think that one just makes way too much sense. If Tortorella doesn't want to do the gig anymore, which I just have the feeling in watching that guy with the media that at some point he's going to be like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
Or I just want to do this once or twice a year as an advisor. And also too, I only think there's so much of Tortorella that team needs and can take on the players' side of things, and they need somebody that's a little more balanced.
Yeah, I don't know that they're going to be able to take a couple more years of that. I mean, I think
I
think they get through it and they have some success, initially. And again, as you said, he took them last year further than anybody thought. But if you're Greg Berube, do you want John Tortorella above you on the hierarchy?
No,
that's my only question.
But
there.
I mean, you're with Keith Jones, who, if I'm not mistaken, he played with in Philly,
I think they're tight. Yeah.
And Danny Briere, who everybody loves. So I mean, if I'm Berube, I don't want John Tortorella as my advisor when I'm coaching. I mean, that's not a guy that I want telling me what to do after I just won a Stanley Cup. I think I want to go somewhere where there's a really good relationship from top to bottom, and I know that I have my freedom to do how I please. And that's why I think Winnipeg's so interesting, because not Pete DeBoer, Paul Maurice had that for the longest time until he chose to step down. And I mean, Rick Bowness had that in the short time that he was there. That's the one that, for me, I just think it's a sneaky job for Craig Berube that would be like, hey, I want to win and I want to win soon. That team just needs some discipline.
Yeah, and also too, though, I could totally, even though they're in the same conference as the Blues, I can get behind Winnipeg. If he helps them make a run that sells more tickets, that solidifies the Jets in Winnipeg, hell yeah, man. Absolutely so.
As we've said 5 times already, clip that for when the Blues and Winnipeg play against each other next year.
Oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't have said that.
Who you'll hate Dallas and Pete DeBoer more, though.
Hey, real quick, speaking of Dallas and sour-faced DeBoer, they can't be super happy today.
No.
They really
Three unanswered goals for were good. How about 4 against in overtime?
I mean, they were winning 3-0 and came back and lost that, and the Avs came back and won that thing 4-3.
I don't know if Dallas is going to be able to stop Colorado. Colorado's got some swag to them right now. I still don't think Georgiev's good, and I think anybody in the East is going to beat anybody in the West. But I think I could see a Colorado versus Edmonton Western Conference final, which honestly is going to be pretty freaking awesome.
If in watching Igor Shesterkin, did I say that
Nailed
correctly?
It. Now spell it.
Public school. In watching him do what he did last night, and even Frederick Anderson to a certain degree, the idea of trading Jordan Bennington over my dead goddamn body. Like, you just can't. If you are going to win a cup, if you are going to compete, you have just got to have somebody back there that can turn it on its head. And Shesterkin, I mean, the Rangers should have probably let up 6-7 goals last night. That guy was friggin' incredible. And I think maybe the Rangers are going to win that series, and I didn't friggin' think that was going to happen.
The best goalies are in the Eastern Conference. I mean, when you think of Frederik Andersen, when you think of Jeremy Swayman, when you think of Shesterkin, and I'm forgetting who the fourth team in the Eastern Conference is right now.
I didn't hear.
Oh, it's Florida. Bobrovsky.
Yeah.
The four best goal. I mean, put those four goaltenders up against Georgiev, Stuart Skinner, Jake Ottinger, and Casey DeSmith, because Demko's not playing that series. I mean, the best goalies are in the Eastern Conference, which I'll lean towards the best goaltender when it comes to a Stanley Cup champion.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Donny, you're talking about, could have given up a number of goals. Sometimes teams play like that because they know they have that guy.
Yeah.
I remember Federico, when we talked to him doing his book, he said, we knew that we could get up ice and try to do whatever we wanted to because we knew Mike Ludi was going to make the save at the other end. And that's back in the era when the games were all 7-6,
Right.
9-8.
Colorado has basically said, though, we have to play this way because if it's in our own end, we're losing thanks to Georgiev.
Yeah, I mean, but that's I think it also kind of shows where the NHL is right now, too. I think 10 years ago, you probably couldn't have gotten away with that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like you couldn't have gotten away with having a subpar goaltender and really have a chance to win the cup.
Yeah, I mean, 10 years ago, it was stingy defense. That's what was winning Stanley Cups because the offense wasn't spending a whole lot of – you were winning games 2-1, 3-2, things like that. Now the offense is so freaking elite that they're winning 4-3, 5-3, and things like that.
Yeah, when they came out of the lockout and they changed the rules, and now I guess you always have to reference which lockout it was.
Yeah,
right?
I was going to say, which one are we talking
to
here?
like 05, and I said something. I remember jumping in a car, Kelly Chase was doing something, and he said, hey, I can hook you up with an interview with Brett. So I jump in the car with Brett and Kelly, and I said, so Brett, you don't take credit for like the changes with all the clutching and grabbing and the eliminating of that, do you? He goes, hell yeah, I do. Why wouldn't I? I've been bitching about that for years.
That away, Brett.
But it's crazy, though, man. I mean, you think about how that guy scored 70 goals or whatever the hell. I mean, it's much, much different. Also, guys, real quick, I'm sorry, last thing, I promise. Why would Austin Matthews not be nominated for the Hart Trophy?
Oh, he wasn't, was he? Because it was Kucherov, McKinnon, and McDavid.
Yeah.
Yeah, Matthews wasn't on it.
I didn't think that he was. I thought it might have been two Colorado players and somebody, but it just, to me,
look it up.
I swear it just something to me, it just really absolutely didn't make sense because if we're talking about MVP.
No, you're right. It was McKinnon,
Wow,
it's
okay.
McDavid,
I was covering
and Kucherov.
Bannister all day yesterday. I didn't look at the announcement.
McKinnon, McDavid, and Kucherov. Yeah,
and
Matthews should have been there over, I would say, McKinnon.
Well, I had McKinnon in there for sure.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because McDavid would be in there for sure. Kucherov, I thought Kucherov should be in there for sure because, I mean,
somebody had to go.
Somebody had to. I would have taken McKinnon out over Matthews.
I'm trying to remember who I had because I voted like a month ago, but I know I had McKinnon in there for sure. And McDavid.
Man, that's a really good point by you because for some reason, it just, because Matthews got for the Selke. And that's why I guess I just assumed he was there. I mean, McKinnon put up 140 points this season.
Good Lord, baby Jesus.
So, I mean, and that was second most points in the National Hockey League. And then, of course, you had McDavid with the most. You had Kucherov that was right there. I mean, as great as it was for Austin Matthews to score 60 goals.
Yeah, I guess.
Or not 60 goals because he got, 59? He didn't finish with 60. Your points weren't anywhere near those other guys.
Man. Boy, that's something. That's
107 points. That's why he wasn't on there.
That's why I asked the question.
Yeah.
All right.
69 goals, not 59. He scored 69, was trying to get to 70.
What is the next? So Blues news is really going to kind of be at a snooze here until Stanley Cup is over, correct? Like as far as player movement, things of that nature.
Every time I've told myself that, Doug Armstrong
another
has
Swede
a press
gets
conference.
signed.
Yeah, another Swede.
Another Swede gets signed. That is amazing to me too. Like Blues love Sweden. I put that on one of my notes too.
When Doug listed his inner circle, we all could have put $1,000 on that. The first name he was going to say was Alexander Steen. After all of the Swedes that have been signed, the 2011 Blues are taking over this Blues roster right now with Alexander Steen helping out. You've got Steve Ott as a part of the coaching staff. Like, you are starting to see these guys take over.
Yeah, I think typically this time of year, assuming you have your coach in place, which now they do,
The focus is the draft.
Yeah, the focus for the team is the draft and free agency, which are bang, late June, early July. And now you get the playoffs. So this is one of those lulls that probably will last a few weeks, and then you get ready for the draft. So I wouldn't anticipate anything. I mean, you're not making big trades. You're not doing any signings this time of year. So, yeah, pretty much a lull.
Yeah. Once playoffs are over, that's when the trades start.
Well, at least we have Cardinal baseball to keep ourselves entertained.
That's right. And by entertained, you mean angry.
I mean, whoa, guys.
Hey, we're not doing a Cardinal podcast.
I mean, whoa. No, we're not. Thank God.
I got to talk about him 3 hours a day. I don't need to do it another hour.
Dude, you guys have all grown up here just like I have. Even in the 90s, when it was like Felix Jose was your best friggin' player or whatever the heck it was, which legitimately I think he was at one point.
That's a name.
This even seems way worse than that. It's incredible. I have never so much purposefully skipped watching Cardinal games. Not even just for other sports. Just like, I don't want to invest my time in that.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I never thought it would be like this.
My dad didn't like the 90s very much, but he doesn't like this team more than the 90s teams.
There is just something completely, and I've been saying this for a while, but like there is something so unlikable about that organization right now, for me personally. I'm not saying for everybody. And I don't know if it's the Mazalok thing. I think that has something to do with it.
I think Mazalok's a big part of it.
Boy, I mean, he is just, I just don't, I do not like the sort of way in which that he presents this. Also, too, we have Doug Armstrong that is legitimately, for better or worse, telling us, hey, we think this team is only going to be good enough to finish X, Y, or Z, and telling us how the plan is going the whole time, ugly or otherwise, but he's telling us. And then it just feels like the Cardinals are in this la-la land of like thinking that somehow just by some luck of the draw, they're going to get back to being as good as they were before.
You don't like being told to be patient, Donnie?
Oh, dude.
You don't like being told to just wait?
We like the spot we're in.
That actually sounded... Does Mo on the podcast?
The base is loaded. Goldschmidt, Arenado, you see him coming up and you're like, all right, here we go. Pop outs and it is... Yeah. Wow, it's something. Okay, guys, thank you very much for letting me talk so much. I appreciate it. For our homeboy, Jeff Burton, who we miss so much, Alex Ferrario from 101 ESPN, Jeremy Rutherford from The Athletic, Donny Fandango from 105.7 The Point. It's the Last Minute Blues podcast. As always, thank you for listening, and let's go Blues.
The Last Minute Blues podcast. Hear more at 1057thepoint.com.